Hey, yo, I want to talk about the fantasy adventure tabletop role-playing game Pathfinder 2nd Edition. It's like Dungeons & Dragons, but with blackjack and hook. Zzz. I honestly have no idea if that joke lands or who blackjack even is. I googled Pathfinder blackjack when I thought of it and this came up. Apparently he's from the Curse of the Crimson Throne, which I guess is an adventure path for Pathfinder 1st Edition, or maybe an audiobook. But whatever, I thought the joke was solid so I've stuck with it. Disclaimer. Before we go any further, the first thing you need to know is that this is not a real secret lair or official crossover. I made these cards myself and I don't work for the people that make Magic the Gathering or Pathfinder. I just play and I'm a fan of both games. But before you click away, I think the cards are really good and worth seeing, and I think the story of their creation is quite interesting. You see, I used to play Dungeons & Dragons because I was curious about how games like that worked, and like many people, I assumed it must be the best because it was the one I'd heard of. It was the one people talked about. But then Hasbro, who own the people that make Dungeons & Dragons, revealed themselves to be greed-focused, moustache-twirling villains. There was this whole thing called the Open Gaming License OGL scandal, which to very quickly sum up, meant once upon a time Hasbro were not only fine with, but encouraged people to make their own stuff using D&D. That's how we got things like non-official rules expansion books and actual play podcasts using the official game, regardless of whether they made money or not. That's how Critical Role got as successful as it is, because everyone was more or less free to make D&D things at their discretion without having to pay Hasbro any money. But the comically evil Hasbro saw the money other people were making and all the things being created and decided that, you made this? No, I made this. And all that creative work and money should be my creative work and money. And so they announced they'd be changing the rules. And I don't mean the rules of the game, I mean the rules around the legal use of their license. Even though they'd already encouraged creators to build a business around and to make their living from D&D. They had an entire license telling people it was okay. Changing it would have resulted in people losing their jobs, just so some Hasbro exec can buy another yacht. And that sucks. At the time, Paizo were one of the many companies affected by Hasbro's decision. See, they made their own version of a Dungeons & Dragons type game with original lore, original characters, blackjack and hooks. They called this game Pathfinder, and it included rules differences to gameplay that they thought would make for a better experience. But because elements of it were made using D&D under the OGL, and the OGL was now going away, Paizo were going to have to republish those books, removing and reworking anything inside them that could even remotely be claimed as belonging to Hasbro. Paizo announced they were having to do this around the same time people started to abandon D&D in droves. People thought it was gross what Hasbro was doing to the very creators and community that helped popularize the game in the first place. I was one of the people to abandon D&D, and like many others, I made the jump to Pathfinder. And I tell you what, I haven't looked back. It is an amazing game for several reasons. All those complaints I had about D&D but just accepted because I didn't know it could be any better are gone because Pathfinder is just a better system, with more thought out rules and rules for more things other than just combat. Also, Paizo don't seem to suck as much as a company. They helped me with the creation of this video for instance, though I'll get to more on that in a bit. All of Pathfinder's classes and player options are really interesting, and they let you create some really cool character concepts, which is what this video is actually about, don't worry, we are getting to it. And lastly, the game is free to play. And I don't mean like how mobile games are free, but instead I mean, this is the website Archives of Nephis, and it just contains all of the rules. When Paizo publish a Pathfinder book, if you don't want to or can't pay for that book, don't worry because all of the character options, equipment, abilities, spells, everything is posted on this kinda ugly but easy to use and understand website for free. You don't even need an account or whatever. Link in the description. It is mind-blowing to me that a company would do this. And if you're wondering, well what's the catch, how does Paizo make money? From what I understand, two ways. First, the website doesn't upload the art or the lore for the narrative, so if you want to see the pretty pictures or read about why certain gods or factions are at war with each other or whatever, then you'll need to buy the books. But if you don't care about that or are going to make up your own lore, then you don't need it. Just get the rules for free. And the second way they make money is by being really goddamn good. After a couple of weeks of play, I was like, no, this is excellent, I want to own these books just for the sake of owning them. I have bought and paid for multiple books containing the classes I like after I'd already started playing those classes, which I got to do for free, but I paid for the books anyway just because I liked them so much. I got the digital copies admittedly, but that's another thing. They're PDFs you can just download. No closed system walled garden you can only access by logging in online every time you want to look at something, which could then be removed or changed later on your account without your consent, unlike some other companies. Paizo makes sales by treating their customers not just fairly, but so well that they give them basically everything they make away for free. This breeds loyalty, and in turn content creators like me will be able to look their audience in the eye and say, play Pathfinder. It's better than D&D and it doesn't cost you anything. So with all that being said, let me tell you the interesting story of how we got here now. See, I reached out to Paizo like a year ago and said, hey, I make my own magic cards featuring Star Trek characters or whatever, and then make videos about them. Watsy put out a D&D set a while back that included class cards which featured the player options like Wizard and Paladin from their game, and I thought, hey, what would those cards look like if they featured the Pathfinder classes? So is that cool with you if I do that, if I make that video? I don't want to get sued. And then I said, I know you send digital copies of books out to content creators so they can review them. Any chance you could send me some because I'm going to need artwork for the cards that I want to make? And they replied and said, hey, you've come to the right place, fill in this form. So I did, and didn't hear back from them for months. Until I got an email entitled Open Call for Review Copies, and I thought, okay, this must be for those cards then, so I filled in that second form and sent it off. The next email I sent to them said, hey, I got those books you sent me after I filled in that form. I wanted them so I could use the art in them to make cards, but you didn't reference that when you sent me the books. You kind of just sent them to me, which I appreciate, but didn't really answer my question. So like, just to be clear, this is a go-ahead from you for me to make those cards then? And this time they did reply and said, what cards? Who are you? We've never heard of you. We don't have any record of sending you any books. What do you want? So I replied again and explained the video idea again and said, I asked you to send me some books so I could use the art and rules to make magic cards with. You sent me the books, so is that cool if I do that then? And they said, no. Or at least more or less no. And instead of using the books they sent, I have to follow their fan content community use guides. So I took a look at that and thought, ugh, that's a lot to digest. Guess I'll get to reading that at some point, and then I put the video idea on the back burner for a later date. Being a solo content creator is a lot of work, and reading block text legalese isn't something I like to do in my downtime. That is until they emailed me again and said, hey, we've got a new book coming out. You're a Pathfinder content creator, right? You want a free copy? And I said, yeah, Pathfinder content creator. That's me alright. I'm always doing it. I'm putting out Pathfinder content all of the time. Free stuff, you say? Well, if you insist. So here we are, Pathfinder Guns and Gears, out now. It features 2 slightly higher tech remastered classes, Inventor, which lets you have a steampunk weapon robot friend or Iron Man suit, and Gunslinger, which lets you play everything from a pistol-toting cowboy to a military sniper. I think it looks cool, and with that, I've done my job. You can't say I didn't review it. This is Pathfinder content. Technically. Paizo, please send me more free books. Though, while I have you, Paizo, I guess I don't fully understand why when I asked if I could use the art from the books, you said no while still sending the books to me anyway, and then sent me to your community use page which says I can use art from the community use package, but that's seemingly something which doesn't exist. There is a link there, but it doesn't work, as in it doesn't download anything, add anything to my account, or forward me anywhere. I did email you about it, but once again you didn't get back to me, so I searched your site for community use package and downloaded what I found there, but if that's wrong and against your community use policy, then I reckon that's on you, Paizo. Because I've done my best to follow your Eldritch rules and I don't know what else you wanted me to do. And while searching, I found whatever the hell this is now. I didn't understand it, but it has Hasbro vibes. I like you, Paizo, and your game is great, so I want to be a cheerleader, but all of these issues are red flags. Get your act together. Anyway, shall we finally look at the cards I created? Pathfinder has a lot of classes to choose from. Some like Fighter and Wizard are staples of the genre, and while not functionally exactly the same as you may find in similar games, they still fill the same sort of party role they do in other fantasy RPGs. However, some Pathfinder classes, like Investigator and Exemplar, are a bit more unusual, and thus these are the 2 classes I've decided to focus on today. So here we go, let's zoom in. Let's start with the Investigator, which you probably won't be shocked to discover is somewhat of a Sherlock Holmes type, solving problems with patient intelligence, which I felt was best represented by the card being blue. However, you may be shocked to discover in Pathfinder, investigators play a little more like how you'd expect a rogue to. You know that scene in the Robert Downey Jr. movie where he's fighting that guy and it's like slow-mo while he works out the exact optimal place to hit him? Well, investigators play a little bit like that, but instead of maximizing their damage by being sneaky, they instead do it by being smart. Of course, the class also has rules to pursue leads, to uncover information, and discover clues to gain more knowledge, just as you'd expect from an investigator archetype. But while the mechanics of doing that thing in a TTRPG are a bit unconventional, in Magic we already have a mechanic which perfectly represents this. And so our first ability reads, when this class enters, investigate, which may have been a little obvious, but for the Investigator class I think it makes sense. In Pathfinder, investigators also get the ability to devise a stratagem, which reads, you assess a foe's weaknesses in combat and use them to formulate a plan of attack. Choose a creature you can see, You can devise a stratagem as a free action if you're aware that creature could help answer the question at the heart of one of your active investigations, and then you get certain bonuses depending on what kind of stratagem you devise. That idea is so much fun to do in a roleplay game. God damn, I love Pathfinder. Anyway, I feel like I've done quite well to reflect that ability because our level 2 reads: at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose target creature an opponent controls, which at this point is almost word for word what the actual Pathfinder ability said. And then to reflect gaining knowledge, it continues: when that creature dies, you guessed it, investigate. Which again is a little bit obvious, but it just fits so perfectly. We mix it up for the level 3 ability though, and I kind of took a bit of everything from the Investigator class. A little bit of methodology, a little bit of strategic strike, a little bit of keen recollection, as well as all of the abilities we've previously covered, and sort of condensed them down into this. At the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you may look at the top card of that player's library any time until end of turn, which is costly to level into, but is very good. And I feel a good representation of what it would feel like to be able to observe and predict your opponent's moves, and use that knowledge to gain an upper hand, without it feeling like some kind of magic. You can only look at their library, not their hand for instance, and you can't know what they're going to play as they play it. But if you're smart enough about it, you can probably work it out. You also can't look at your own library, and you can only do it to whichever of your opponents whose turn it currently is. These limitations aren't much, but I think it gives your opponent enough wiggle room to play around it, if they're smart enough about it. Which is exactly the sort of Sherlock versus Moriarty dynamic I think the Investigator class represents well, and I was trying to capture in the gameplay. And then we have the Exemplar, all about becoming a demigod or avatar for some higher power. The allusion to Maui being obvious, I feel, especially in the art. If I'm being honest, the colours I picked for the design are the part I'm least confident of, because it's red-white based mostly off of little more than vibes. So if you want to tell me how wrong I am for that choice in the comments, I doubt I'll disagree. Fun fact though, the card is mythic, and I've done this because Pathfinder assigns rarities to its classes. For instance, that Inventor and Gunslinger earlier are uncommon classes, which basically means check with your GM before you play them because maybe that sort of higher level tech doesn't exist in the campaign setting that you're playing. Exemplar is a rare class because, you're basically playing a god incarnate, which is kind of a big deal, hence why it's mythic. Exemplars are all about icons, artifacts of power that the player channels their divine strength into, imbuing them with special properties. And according to this advice on how to play Exemplar, during combat encounters you fight on the vanguard, scattering lesser foes to the winds, you concentrate your divine energy into the right weapon or tool for the moment, when an arrow strikes your skin it stings no more than a flea, when your spear strikes forward it can pierce gods. First off, sick. And second, to reflect this combination of artifacts and aggression, our first ability reads: when this class enters, exile target artifact, to represent getting stuck into your opponent's front line and messing with their game plan. And to reflect an Exemplar's creation of icons, this class has all activated and triggered abilities of all cards exiled with it, which I realise could be incredibly powerful in the right circumstances, but it is a demigod class, and I'm hoping the 2 colour cost of 5 and the fact it's legendary offsets the power level a bit. But I admit I can see this being gross, even if that does feel somehow appropriate. In Pathfinder, Exemplars actually get to create 3 icons, and so level 2 reads: exile up to 2 target artifacts you control to reflect this. Artifacts you control though this time because I didn't want it to be able to completely dismantle an opponent with constant removal. However, the class will still get the abilities of those exiled cards because of that static effect from level 1. And finally at level 3 in Pathfinder, Exemplars get a root epithet, which according to the rules is a word or phrase that seems to always stick in the mind of those describing you, and your epithets grant you additional abilities. So okay, because so many magic creatures already have epithets, I thought in keeping with what the card is already doing, level 3 could read: exile up to 1 target creature, which I guess flavour-wise means it's technically stealing the epithet, or it could target a creature without an epithet at all, but whatever, close enough. More importantly, it still gets the abilities from the exiled creature, just like with the artifacts, to reflect an Exemplar gaining additional abilities from an epithet. There is one last line of text, though this is more of a homage to Magic the Gathering cards than it is to Pathfinder. Cards like the Gods of Theros and Amonkhet, and even to a lesser extent Kaldheim and the Faux Gods of New Phyrexia, all reflect divinity as being something that can only be achieved and fully utilised after certain criteria are met. The Exemplar is a class that also explores the dynamic of embracing godhood, and so the final line reads: this class becomes an XX avatar creature, avatar not god because I feel it's more accurate to the class, with indestructible, because most magic gods hint at being undying in some way, where X is equal to 2 plus the number of cards exiled with it. which means the card should be a 6/6 unless either you've chosen not to or not been able to exile certain cards, in which case it'll be smaller. Or, unless you can somehow combo with it and get the class to exile even more cards, in which case you're rewarded for your efforts by having the creature it becomes grow stronger in terms of extra abilities and larger power and toughness. Does that mean that Exemplar could also be crewed or equipped like a vehicle or equipment? Yes, but I guess just don't worry about that, I think it's still good. And that's it, that's both the Investigator and the Exemplar class from Pathfinder as if they were Magic the Gathering cards. Would you play them? Which is your favourite? If you want to print them out and play with them yourselves, you can via my Patreon where they're available as a PDF to access and download for free. Link in the description. While you're there, please check out my tiers and consider becoming a member, especially if you've enjoyed this video and would like to see others like it. I've got some fun rewards on there for signing up, and YouTube kind of sucks, so I could really use the support. So please check it out, link in the description again. Oh, and let me know what classes you'd like to see next time. I've got my eye on that gunslinger. And maybe next time, instead of taking up half the runtime explaining who Paizo are and why Hasbro suck, I can just link people back to this video. Maybe next time, I'll even do 3 cards. Imagine.
Thank you very much for watching this video, and thank you to everyone that supports me, like Eggvoid the particle that permeates all existence, and the rest of my patrons whose names are on screen now. I'd also like to thank the sponsor for this video, me and my Patreon page, where you can get your name credited on screen too. Check it out in the link in the description below. Hit the like button, leave a comment, install an adblock, and most importantly, subscribe and share this video with a friend. Hit the notification bell and do all those things the algorithm loves. If you agree or disagree with any of my points, or you want to see me do a video on another subject, let me know, and I will see you next time.